Okay, so the meeting is resumed and we are in open. Yes, we are in open and we are on, yes, we had a resolution just prior to breaking for lunch. Yes. And we are now on Plan Change 33. Plan Change 33.
Kia ora tātou. If it's helpful for the Commission, I'm happy to give a very brief overview of Plan Change 33. As you're aware, this is a significant plan change to the Tauranga City Plan in terms of housing intensification. We had our direction from central government as we were doing another plan change on residential intensification, which provided some very clear direction to Tier 1 councils in terms of residential intensification. So the two key components were to implement the medium density residential standards, so your 3 stories, 3 dwellings permitted on a site, as a permitted activity across all of our relevant residential zones. So that applies to our suburban residential, our Wairākei residential, city living. So a very large portion of our city was affected or is affected. The second component of the direction from central government is to give effect to Policy 3 of the National Policy Statement on Urban Development. And there's 2 key components that apply to our council. First of all is to enable as much height as possible in the city centre zone. And the second component is to enable greater height and density around commercial centres, around local in-town neighbourhood centres. So in terms of what we notified is to propose to delete our existing residential zones and rezone the city to apply these new rules. And the 2 key zones that we have proposed are the medium density residential zone, which applies across all of our residential zones, which is the 3 stories, 3 dwellings as a permitted activity. 4 or more dwellings requires a resource consent where we consider our infrastructure capacity requirements and urban design. And then there's the high density residential zone, and that is proposed to be enabled or rezoned around our identified commercial centres. So we propose additional height around our local centres and our town centres. And that was a variation depending on the size of the centre, having a walkable catchment of 4 stories up to 6 stories in our town centres, and then along the Cameron Road corridor, 8 stories and around that city centre zone. Again, the medium density residential standards are permitted, but 4 or more, you still will go into resource consent process and consider those infrastructure capacity and urban design. And then coming to the city centre, we enabled greater height in much larger area, but just remembering that those still have consent triggers for things like the airport flight path, which do limit that. Another thing, matter just to be aware of, that the recommendations or what we propose is also to rezone Smith's Farm. So that's rezoning that piece of land from rural residential to medium density residential to enable greater housing intensification. And we also propose a number of qualifying matters. The majority of those is where height and density was already limited within the city plan through areas such as significant multi-areas, ecological areas, but we did propose new qualifying matters as well. And probably the most significant qualifying matter that we did recommend was to limit height around our coastal environment. So that means where you increase height, it triggers again the need for resource consent and considering those landscape matters. So that's a brief overview of our recommendations. As you'll be aware, we presented on the 29th of March in that public workshop where we're really focused on the 6 recommendations that the independent hearings panel did not align with council officers' recommendation. So as we said, they largely did align with all of our recommendations, but there were 6 key that I won't go through today, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, thank you, Janine, for that. Look, an enormous amount of work went on, so we do want to acknowledge that. We were donkey deep in a plan change already, and I know that it was put huge strain on the resources to pivot and pick up, and I think it was plan change 2026. So plan change 23 was a much bigger piece of work, and so we really do appreciate all the work that's been done on that. Enormous amount of submissions and an enormous amount of evidence in front of the independent hearings panel, which the commissioners have ploughed through on the 6 different recommendations that the IHP made. And those were retaining the heights and zoning for Mount Maunganui North as originally proposed by the council, limiting residential sites to protect the view shaft from Pukahinahina to Moau, imposing a 12 height maximum, the Mitre 10 mega site. So I think you had proposed a staged height and they rejected that and had an all over height, other way around.
No, correct. We proposed a transitional height from 12 to 22 metres to 27 metres. The panel's recommendation is to have 12 across the Mitre 10 building itself, but transitioning straight to 27 metres.
Removing the height limit over Area F in the city centre zone, and introducing an advisory rail line vibration alert layer at 60 metres from the designation boundary, and setting the minimum carriageway width for an access way servicing up to 4 dwelling units at 4 metres rather than 3.5. So the Commission, I want to make it very clear, we had that public workshop where the staff presented the findings of the panel to us. The Commission have gone away and without any involvement of staff whatsoever have now come up with the recommendations that we want to put forward, and they have been tabled. Are we able to put them up on screen, or do we just want to talk to them? I think, you want to put them up on screen? I think it would, if we can, it would be good. But essentially we are accepting 4 of the 6 recommendations from the independent hearings panel and referring to 2 we are rejecting, which means they will be then passed to the minister. And the 2 we are rejecting are retaining the heights and zoning for Mount Maunganui, and we've set out the reasons for that. We have an alternate recommendation, which is to increase the notified height from 12 metres to 22 metres within the commercial centre, and upzoning and increasing the notified height from MDRS to 22 metres for the residential land within 400 metres walkable catchment of the town centre, and 16 metres for the residential land within 400 to 800 metres walkable catchment of the town centre. And we set out our reasons. And then the second one is, the second recommendation we're rejecting is removing the height limit over Area F in the city centre zone and the consequential changes to maps in Chapter 17 and relevant provisions. And our alternative recommendation is retaining a height limit of 16 metres in Area F in the city centre zone, and we've got reasons for that. And I'm happy to move those alternate recommendations with the reasons. Well, I'm happy to move the recommendations outlined in the paper that we've tabled. Someone prepared to second them? We're just checking on what's gone up. So the recommendations are that we receive the report, accept all the recommendations in the report of the IHP, with the exception of the two recommendations set out in the table below, and that includes the reasons for rejecting the recommendations and the alternate recommendations in accordance with clause 101 1B, Schedule 1 of the RNA. Have we got them? Those are all the reasons. So it is actually quite hard to read. Got the right one? It should have. I can't read that.
Stretch it out a bit. Can you just stretch it out? Because the first column.
Can you go back a page? I just want to make sure that you've got the right. No, next page. Yeah, next page. No, it's the next paragraph. Oh, okay. No, that's not the version that we're tabling. Let's take that one down. Coral.
You received an email from Cole?
Yep. No, it's not. It's only in the reasons.
Yeah. So just while that's coming up, just having a quick look at what you've described and was up there in terms of the heights around the Mount Maunganui town centre, we're just looking at, and Janine will explain further, whether that fully aligns your recommendation with the staff position that we had through our section 42 report, or whether there was any variation in those heights that you are proposing. I think further, Janine.
Yeah, and so I think where I'm coming from is just to be clear that in that recommendation, it's where it's talks about the heights, just to be really clear that the Commission are aware that qualifying matters are proposed to apply to that Mount North area.
Yes.
And so when we
Yes.
say, when we say that, that height within the 400 and the 400 to 800, there is a significant portion of that land which is limited in height and requires a further assessment in terms of cultural and landscape. So just wanted to be
Absolutely
clear that that's aware.
And that is that Appendix 15? Yeah, Appendix 15. So we refer to Appendix 15 in the reasons. Yep. We'll make sure you get a good copy of this.
No, I'm sure you will. I'm just
From the council, yep. So can we just go through this now? Just make sure that we've got. Yep. Next page. Yes, that's right, Mr. Keeney's. Next page. There's your qualifying matters. And set out in the evidence of Mr. Luca, the urban design principles incorporated. Yep, so that's the right version. Yep. Yes, yeah. So I've moved it. Did someone? Stephen seconded it. Right. Any discussion? I have to say it was very helpful having two planners as part of the commission.
I think just Chair, just highlighting, that's why there's clearly the reference to the evidence that was presented and picking up, I think where Janine was heading, notwithstanding the alternative recommendation, there are a number of requirements in terms of qualifying matters, the need for resource consents. Once you get above a certain number of independent units, and a whole lot of focus in terms of urban design and the impact on adjacent properties.
So,
Yeah, I just kind of want to acknowledge the staff as well for the work that's gone into this. When we first started, Plan Change 26 was on the table and we were keen to make some progress on 26, particularly along Te Papa, with all the work we were doing on Cameron Road. And the government had other ideas, but I think we've landed in a good place. But also taking into account, I think, community input over the last 18 months, been quite an accelerated process to deliver this plan change. But I do want to acknowledge the community input into this as well, the submitters, our decision makers stepping through this process. We still have the variation on Tauranga West to work through. But ultimately, the decision we make today then gets passed on to the Minister. And we'll see what he thinks about the decision we've made today. So, yeah, just want to make those acknowledgements.
nothing further? I'll put the motion then. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thanks very much. Do you want a copy? Okay, so that we will now continue on with the public excluded part of the agenda. Can I have a motion to go back into public excluded for the reasons outlined? Thank you,